Absolutely. Here's key point one, fully expanded to approximately 750 words, in the requested style and without a subheading. When both you and the narcissist stop contacting each other, the initial silence can feel disorienting, even unsettling. It's a strange, almost uncanny pause in a relationship that was likely full of emotional highs and lows, manipulation, and constant attention seeking. Many people think that the moment they stop responding to a narcissist, the tension will immediately lift and peace will arrive like a sudden wave. But the reality is much more complex. Silence has its own weight. For the narcissist, it is unfamiliar territory. They are accustomed to having a steady stream of feedback, whether it's positive reinforcement, attention, or even conflict, which allows them to maintain a sense of control over you and the situation. When that feedback disappears, they are forced into a state of uncertainty, and uncertainty is deeply uncomfortable for a narcissist. They thrive on predictability, control, and the illusion that they can influence the thoughts and behaviors of others. Your absence, your refusal to engage destabilizes that sense of control. You are no longer a participant in their story in the way they want you to be. This can provoke confusion, frustration, and eventually internal panic, although that may not always be immediately visible. For you, the silence may bring a mix of relief and anxiety. On one hand, there's a sense of freedom in no longer being under the constant scrutiny or manipulation of the narcissist. On the other hand, the quiet can feel heavy, almost oppressive at first, because it forces you to confront your own thoughts and emotions without distraction. Without the narcissist's interference, you have to sit with your feelings, examine your patterns, and reckon with the reality of what the relationship was, and that can be uncomfortable. It's normal to feel waves of guilt, doubt, or second guessing. You might find yourself wondering if you made the right decision or fearing what the narcissist might be thinking. These feelings are natural, but they are also temporary. They are part of the process of reclaiming your emotional autonomy. It's also worth noting that silence is a kind of mirror. When you stop responding, you create a space that reflects back not only your own strength, but also the narcissist's limitations. You no longer participate in their drama, and suddenly, the relationship dynamic that was once familiar becomes a void. The narcissist may attempt to fill that void in various ways, whether through indirect attempts to engage, manipulative messaging, or other strategies designed to draw you back in. Yet, every time you choose not to respond, you reinforce a boundary that is crucial for your own well-being. The initial silence, therefore, is not just an absence of communication. It is an active statement of self-possession. It declares that your attention, your energy, and your emotional investment are no longer negotiable for someone who repeatedly disregarded your needs. Over time, this silence becomes a powerful tool for transformation. It gives you the mental space to reflect on the relationship with clarity, free from the constant interference of manipulation. It allows you to process the emotional impact of the past, understand patterns you may have missed, and cultivate a stronger sense of self. For the narcissist, the silence often triggers a cascade of internal reactions, including confusion, anxiety, and attempts to regain influence. But for you, the silence is the beginning of liberation. It is the first step toward reclaiming your life, your peace of mind, and your emotional autonomy. The power of silence is subtle but profound. It interrupts the cycle of control, diminishes the narcissist's leverage, and empowers you to prioritize your own well-being. In those early days, it may feel strange, even lonely, but it is also transformative. You are no longer participating in the push and pull of manipulation. You are no longer feeding someone else's need for validation at the cost of your own emotional health. This stage, this initial pause, is the foundation for all the growth, insight, and liberation that follows. It is the point at which the narrative begins to shift. The power dynamic starts to change because you have taken back the most important thing: your own attention, your own emotional energy, and your own choices. What begins as discomfort, even anxiety, slowly transforms into clarity, strength, and self-possession. The initial silence is not empty, it is full of potential. It is the first essential step in the journey toward freedom, healing, and ultimately the ability to live fully without the shadow of manipulation dictating your every thought and action. If you want, I can continue and expand key point 2 to the same depth next, so you'll have the full set of speech points ready for your final talk. Do you want me to do that? Here's key point 2 fully expanded to around 750 words in the same style as requested and without a subheading. Once the silence has taken hold and both you and the narcissist have ceased contact, the next phase often involves what can be described as a narcissist panic. This is a psychological and emotional reaction that occurs when the narcissist realizes they no longer have influence over you and that their usual methods of control, manipulation, attention seeking, guilt tripping, and even charm are no longer effective. For a narcissist, control is central to their sense of self. They rely on the reactions of others to validate their identity, maintain a sense of superiority, and reinforce the illusion that they are indispensable in the lives over those around them. When you stop responding, you disrupt that illusion, and this disruption can trigger a profound internal anxiety. Unlike someone with a secure sense of self, a narcissist's self-worth is contingent upon external validation. They are accustomed to having a predictable pattern of interaction where their needs, desires, and whims are attended to and in many cases prioritized over others. When that pattern is interrupted by your absence, it challenges their very perception of reality. Suddenly, the narrative they have been maintaining, the one in which they are always in control, always desired, always relevant, is in jeopardy. The panic that arises is not merely about missing your attention. It is about a perceived loss of power, status, and identity. You may notice subtle, or sometimes dramatic, attempts to breach the silence. These can include sudden messages, comments on social media, indirect attempts to elicit a response, or even gestures designed to provoke guilt or curiosity. These behaviors are often inconsistent, confusing, and unpredictable because they are attempts to regain a sense of control in the absence of your cooperation. They may oscillate between charm and aggression, apology and accusation as they try to test boundaries and gauge whether you are truly committed to the separation. This stage can feel emotionally turbulent for you as well. The unexpected or inconsistent attempts by the narcissist to re-engage may trigger old patterns of doubt and fear, causing you to question your decision to remain silent. It is crucial to recognize that these tactics are not genuine attempts at reconciliation or self-reflection. They are strategies born out of panic and desperation. Understanding this distinction is empowering. The narcissist's panic is ultimately a reflection of their inner fragility, not a commentary on your worth or behavior. Observing their internal turmoil from a distance can provide clarity and reinforce your decision to maintain boundaries. It can also highlight the contrast between their need-driven reactions and your growing autonomy. While the narcissist experiences panic, you have the opportunity to observe, reflect, and strengthen your sense of self. This is the moment to remember that their anxiety is about their unmet needs, not a measure of your value. You are no longer responsible for managing their emotions or feeding their ego. This realization is critical because it transforms the dynamic. It shifts the focus from reacting to manipulation to understanding the mechanics of narcissistic behavior. It allows you to see the relationship for what it truly was, a pattern of exploitation and control, and to reclaim your emotional power. The narcissist's panic also often exposes their vulnerabilities. In the absence of your responses, the cracks in their self-image become apparent. They may project, rationalize, or blame internally, but these are coping mechanisms designed to maintain their sense of control. Observing this process without engaging allows you to detach emotionally while gaining insight into the patterns that define the relationship. Over time, the panic tends to diminish, but it may resurface in cycles, especially if the narcissist perceives any shift in your boundaries or engagement. Your consistent silence and emotional independence act as a stabilizing force for yourself while simultaneously demonstrating that their strategies no longer hold power over you. Recognizing the narcissist's panic as a natural reaction to losing control helps reduce fear, guilt, or confusion that may arise during this phase. It is a reminder that your absence is impactful, not because it punishes them, but because it signifies your reclamation of agency. In essence, their panic is the external evidence of the internal shift, the moment when the balance of power begins to tip away from manipulation and toward your autonomy. This stage, while uncomfortable to observe or experience, is also a profound turning point. It is an opportunity to witness the consequences of boundaries, to understand the psychological mechanics at play, and to reinforce your own path toward emotional liberation. The narcissist's panic is temporary and self-focused, while your growth, clarity, and freedom are enduring. If you want, I can now expand key point 3 to the same length and style, keeping the full speech ready to flow naturally from key point 1 and 2. Do you want me to do that next? Here's key point 3 fully expanded to approximately 750 words in the same style and without a subheading. As the silence continues and the narcissist's panic begins to manifest, another significant effect emerges. The mirror effect. This is the stage where the narcissist, deprived of your attention, begins to confront aspects of themselves that are usually hidden behind manipulation, charm, or control. For much of the relationship, their behavior may have seemed purposeful, confident, and even magnetic, but in truth, it was sustained by external validation and your reactions. Without your engagement, the facade begins to crack, and what remains is a reflection of their true self, often fragile, hollow, and vulnerable in ways they rarely allow anyone to see. The mirror effect is powerful because it reveals the contrast between appearance and reality. When a narcissist no longer has someone to respond to manage, or to manipulate their identity, which is heavily dependent on external reinforcement, is left exposed. The traits you once perceived as strength or dominance may appear insecure, inconsistent, or reactive. Their sense of self, which relied on controlling your perceptions and responses, is destabilized. This is important for you to recognize because it underscores a crucial truth. The dynamics you were caught in were not about you failing or inadequately responding. They were about the narcissist's reliance on external validation to sustain their self-image. Witnessing the mirror effect can be enlightening and even empowering. It allows you to see clearly the difference between the person they appear to be and the person they actually are when stripped of control. The illusions of charm, authority, and emotional sophistication are revealed to be dependent on your participation in their narrative. By stepping away, by ceasing contact, you force the narcissist into a confrontation with themselves that they are often ill-equipped to handle. They may engage in action, blaming others for their own shortcomings or rationalizing their behaviors to maintain a sense of coherence. These are coping mechanisms, attempts to protect a fragile ego, but they are also revealing. You begin to understand that their reactions are about fear, insecurity, and unmet needs, rather than any reflection of your worth or mistakes. This insight is transformative because it allows you to emotionally detach. You no longer feel responsible for managing their feelings, defending against perceived slights, or fixing what was never yours to fix. The mirror effect shows that the relationship dynamics were not a reflection of your value. They were a reflection of the narcissist's need to maintain control and the illusion of superiority. This understanding is a turning point. It shifts the lens through which you view the past interactions and enables you to see patterns clearly without distortion. It allows you to reclaim perspective and to realize that many of the conflicts, criticisms, and manipulations were not about genuine concern or connection, but about fulfilling the narcissist's need for validation and dominance. For the narcissist, the mirror effect is often uncomfortable, even threatening. It exposes vulnerabilities and insecurities they rarely acknowledge. Their strategies, once effective in manipulating emotions and controlling perception, no longer have leverage. Without a willing participant, the narcissist is forced to confront an identity that is incomplete and dependent. For you, observing this without engagement is an act of empowerment. It reinforces the wisdom of maintaining boundaries and of prioritizing your own emotional well-being. The mirror effect also serves as a reminder of the limits of empathy in these relationships. While compassion for others is valuable, a narcissist's behavior is fundamentally self-focused and resistant to change. Recognizing this truth allows you to redirect energy toward your own growth, healing, and clarity, rather than trying to reconcile or fix someone who is unwilling or incapable of genuine reflection. Over time, the mirror effect deepens your understanding of relational dynamics. You gain insight into manipulation, control, and the fragile architecture of a narcissistic self. More importantly, you begin to see yourself as separate from these dynamics, no longer entangled in cycles of control, validation, or emotional reaction. The narcissist's reflection becomes a teaching moment, a lens through which you can observe patterns, anticipate potential behaviors, and solidify your boundaries. In this stage, clarity begins to replace confusion, detachment replaces compulsion, and empowerment replaces fear. The mirror effect is not about judgment or revenge. It is about insight, understanding, and the reclamation of your own psychological space. It reveals truths about the narcissist, but more importantly, it illuminates truths about yourself, your strength, your resilience, and your capacity for self-sovereignty when you stop participating in someone else's manipulative narrative. By allowing the mirror effect to unfold, you embrace a deeper sense of awareness, emotional independence, and ultimately freedom from the relational dynamics that once held you captive. If you want, I can now expand key point 4 to the same depth and style, keeping the full speech coherent and ready for delivery. Do you want me to continue with that? Here's key point 4 fully expanded to around 750 words in the same style and without a subheading. As the silence continues and the narcissist's panic and mirror effect become evident, something profound begins to happen for you. Emotional liberation. This stage is subtle, often gradual, but deeply transformative. Initially, cutting off contact may feel unsettling or even frightening. You might question yourself repeatedly, wondering if you did the right thing or fearing what the narcissist might be thinking or doing in response to your absence. These thoughts are natural because you are transitioning from a dynamic where your emotions were entangled with someone else's needs and manipulation to a state in which your emotions are entirely your own. The liberation begins quietly and may start as small realizations, a sense of relief after ignoring a manipulative message, a moment of peace when you no longer anticipate conflict, or simply the absence of constant tension in your day-to-day life. These small moments accumulate, creating a larger shift in your emotional landscape. You start to notice that your thoughts, your energy, and your attention are no longer consumed by the narcissist. You begin to recognize that your feelings are valid on their own, independent of how they were previously interpreted, manipulated, or invalidated by the other person. Emotional liberation also allows you to reclaim your autonomy. Previously, much of your decision-making, whether conscious or unconscious, may have been influenced by the narcissist anticipating their reactions, managing their moods, or attempting to avoid conflict. Now, without their presence or interference, you are free to make choices purely for yourself. This may involve reestablishing boundaries, reconnecting with activities and interests that were neglected, or simply enjoying the freedom to feel and think without monitoring how your actions might affect them. One of the most powerful aspects of emotional liberation is the reclamation of your inner peace. The constant cycle of highs and lows, manipulation and validation, attention-seeking and criticism can leave someone drained and anxious. By removing yourself from that cycle, you create a space where calm and stability can flourish. You no longer exist in a state of hypervigilance, waiting for the next unpredictable reaction. Instead, you begin to cultivate an emotional environment that is steady, safe, and nurturing. It is also a stage where self-compassion grows. You may reflect on the ways you were manipulated, criticized, or minimized, and while there may be feelings of anger or sadness, you also begin to offer yourself understanding and kindness. You recognize that the manipulations were not your fault and that your worth is inherent, not contingent on the narcissist's approval or attention. Emotional liberation transforms the relationship you have with yourself. Instead of constantly checking in with someone who never truly prioritized your needs, you are learning to listen to yourself, validate your own feelings, and prioritize your well-being. It is a profound shift from external dependency to internal strength. This stage also brings clarity regarding the narcissist's influence. As you distance yourself emotionally, you start to see patterns more objectively, understand the mechanics of manipulation, and recognize how much of your past stress and anxiety was tied to their behavior rather than your own failings. This insight reinforces your autonomy and strengthens your ability to maintain boundaries moving forward. Importantly, emotional liberation is not about revenge, retaliation, or keeping score. It is about creating a life that is free from coercion, control, and unnecessary drama. It is about reclaiming your time, your energy, and your attention. Each moment you spend not responding, not engaging, and not reacting is a reinforcement of your independence and a step toward long-term healing. Over time, this liberation grows stronger. You find yourself thinking less about the narcissist, experiencing fewer emotional triggers, and feeling more confident in your own decisions. The anxiety, fear, and tension that may have dominated your life gradually give way to peace, resilience, and self-assurance. Emotional liberation is transformative because it shifts the center of your emotional universe from someone else back to yourself. It allows you to rebuild your sense of identity, restore your confidence, and cultivate joy and fulfillment that are no longer contingent on the narcissist's presence or approval. In essence, this stage represents the profound freedom that comes from reclaiming your life, your emotions, and your energy. It is the reward for maintaining silence, setting boundaries, and refusing to participate in manipulative dynamics. Emotional liberation is not instantaneous, but it is inevitable for those who stay committed to their own well-being. It is a reminder that freedom, peace, and self-possession are within reach when we stop prioritizing the control of someone who never truly valued us. If you like, I can now move on to key point 5, expanding it to the same depth so we can continue building the full speech seamlessly. Do you want me to do that next?